So welcome to the first episode of the Fireside Chat. We are here every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern in the Gridcoin Discord server, and we talk all things Gridcoin. We'll also talk about other things too if they come up, anything related to blockchain, cryptocurrency, decentralized education, leadership, technology, and analysis. That's really it. So if you want to participate in discussions about Gridcoin development specifically, I would recommend you join the Gridcoin Hangouts, which are hosted here in the same Discord server at 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays, every other Saturday. And between the Hangouts, there is a Gridcoin classroom at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. So we're just going to get right into it here. Being the first episode, thought it would be nice to just say what Gridcoin is, why we're here, and what we're trying to build. And before we get going, this is hosted by me, Jay Ringo, and I Like Chocolate, and the Goblin Popper. We'll be here every week. Bring your questions, and we'll have a nice little chat. So Gridcoin is a blockchain-based distributed computing network powered by the idle processing potential of existing hardware. Access to this network is free for those with data to process, while participants of the network are incentivized with cryptocurrency minted by the Gridcoin protocol. So the main vocab there is idle processing potential. So what this means is to take a line from one of the community members, Josh, who recently did a rebranding of the Gridcoin image. IPP, idle processing potential, is what your computer is doing when you're asleep. So we all have these computers or phones or PlayStations or Xboxes, anything with a processor in it. And when we're not using it, it has a resource, the processing power that it holds, that we can tap into and use to crunch data, essentially. And we could use it for simulations, graphical rendering, just straight data crunching, political, social, any sort of data like that. So that is IPP. And right now we direct that IPP towards BOINC, which is the Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Networked Computing. And they are primarily science and math-based data analysis projects. For example, they have a project that runs patient-specific cancer treatments. They have a project that just finds new prime numbers. They do have a climate prediction one. Go ahead, Chocolate.
You map the Milky Way.
Right, it's got a whole bunch of space. Actually, it's SETI is the main space one. It was built out of the SETI program in the late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, so that is BOINC. So essentially, Gridcoin is a giant supercomputer built off the idle processing potential of people just all over the world. We're a global network, a global community. And most of us are here for science, to further scientific research and to give scientists and researchers access to a supercomputer that might otherwise cost them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to get access to. Is that about covered? Does anyone else have anything they want to say about what Gridcoin is or why we're here or anything like that? All right, then I guess today the theme of the chat today is just that question: why we're here. What does Gridcoin mean to you? Why do you want to contribute to Gridcoin and by proxy BOINC? And one of the main principles of Gridcoin is it's a blockchain that mints currency. So when you contribute your IPP to approved projects, you get paid with a currency that's minted by a blockchain protocol, which is called Gridcoin. So there is that money factor in there. The main push is to get it to the point where if it was profitable, it would be great, but we want to at least, it costs money to run processing, run GPUs and CPUs, so we want to reimburse people for the electricity they spend, so they're more willing to contribute to the science. And I think we're just going to go around here. I'll start, and then we can go to Chocolate and Goblin Popper about what it means to us. for me, on a personal level, I come from a scientific family. I've always loved science, but it just wasn't in the cards for me to become a scientist. But I still, I read the science magazines. I enjoy the content and the idea of what science can do for humanity in the future, make life better for everyone, essentially. So I'm not going to become a scientist, I don't think. It's a little late for that, but I like Gridcoin because it helps me contribute to scientific advancements, and I learned through it. I meet a whole bunch of people. Some of them are scientists, some of them are training to become scientists. Other people are crypto heads. They're here for the blockchain aspect, but we're all here teaching each other what we know about what we know. So that's the main thing I love about what Gridcoin is doing. It's making me get involved with BOINC and contribute. It allows me to contribute to science when I might not otherwise do that. Chocolate or Popper, you wanna take it from here?
So I think one of the most attractive features of Gridcoin is that it does reimburse you for the electricity that you're spending, and BOINC has been around for some 20 years or so, and there have been more and more projects being added, but ultimately there's a sort of a bottleneck of how many people you can get to join this kind of thing, to join this distributed supercomputer, this worldwide distributed supercomputer, because of the costs of it, also the setup of it, just downloading the software and deciding which projects, and it's not, it takes effort, and a lot of people don't have the willpower to do that or the time. I think what Gridcoin does is it, beyond reimbursing people, it can also create a platform to enable people to come together and contribute to projects that they weren't able to, that wouldn't otherwise have the processing power that they need. They might need to go to a super, otherwise they need a supercomputer, like Milky Way at home, for example, or some of this world community grid. This stuff requires a lot of processing power, and it's just not available for people who are doing this not for profit, or even people who are doing this for profit, but they need to do a lot of processing just in order to get some preliminary results so that they could analyze it later. So but what Gridcoin does, or what it can provide in the future, it doesn't really do it so much right now yet because we're still in the growing phase. But I think that one day, it really can become the largest supercomputer in the world, and people can come together and balance out the currently very centralized computer processing that happens. Most of the computer processing, it's done between very, very large, very, very strong centralized institutions. So we're talking about some financial institution that needs to compute some stuff, and they go to a supercomputer or something like that, or it's usually places that have a lot of money that are going to other places that also have a lot of money, and then they're kind of just interacting with each other, and then the vast majority of the population is kind of left out. They don't really understand what's going on. They can't really contribute. And so what Gridcoin can provide, and I know that this is sort of a contentious topic, but I do think that Gridcoin mining can become, or I shouldn't call it mining, but contributing to BOINC through Gridcoin can become profitable at some point. And if we reach that point and sustainably, we really will be able to. I think we'll reach. We'll be in a new phase of scientific inquiry. I think.
Yeah, I like that. It's a concept of building an economy of science, because we're minting a currency that has value based on scientific computing, supercomputing, that's more accessible than those giant centralized supercomputers you were talking about. Yeah, I think that's a great part of what we're building here.
Yeah, on my side, I feel like I fall in a lot with in similarity with what you said, Ringo, right? I didn't really come from a scientific family or whatever, but I was always kind of that nerd at school. I always thought it was really cool. Always kind of like read about it, and what little I understood, I always thought was really neat. I always go on Reddit and some of those other sites, and always like to read those Ask Science and keep up with it that way. But like day to day, I always kind of had that little bit of a drive of like, what can I do day to day to kind of progress science, right? And it always seemed kind of stupid in my head, like oh, should I be recycling more, or should I be like purchasing a certain type of car? Like, what can I do day to day to make the world better or progress science? Could I have some economic skills? What can I use that for? Can I answer problems online? There's one thing I ended up running into called Zooniverse. I don't know if any of you guys have heard that, where you just go on and it's for things that computers can't tackle, and you go on and you like lend your time to like identify things in pictures, right, or things like that. And I did that for a little while because I wanted to contribute to something. And I think Gridcoin gives me that, and gives other people that capability of contributing passive amounts of time to assist something. And not only just assist to something and assist to science, but to contribute and assist things that they want to. Because I think it's very important to point out that Gridcoin, and I know we've mentioned this before, Gridcoin is not the only science coin. It's not the only coin that contributes to scientific research. There are other things like CureCoin and SolarCoin that have a very beneficial impact by mining it. But I think the main difference is, with CureCoin, you're doing protein folding, and that's really cool. But if you're a scientist, if you're someone who's really interested in astronomy or the universe, folding proteins may not like kind of scratch that, right? And so Gridcoin gives the ability to have someone do whatever they want, or as many of them as they want, right? You can have 10 or so projects in your wallet crunching at all times if that's really how you want to do it. And so for me, I just came from a background of, I think this is a cool way for me to have a little bit of a hobby that's also actually doing something productive for someone else, right? And I love that I kind of get to do that as a hobby. I mean, I just finished hooking up my Raspberry Pi to do basic SETI crunching. And when I say it's slow, I mean, I'm about to actually finish my first ever work unit for SETI. Actually just finished with 21 hours and 35 minutes for one unit of SETI, right? And I just finished my first one probably in the last like 10, 15 minutes.
Did you find aliens?
I don't know I don't know yet. But the point is, it's like, I have a Raspberry Pi that uses like 5 watts of powers, right? 5 watts of power. And, and it barely costs me anything to run. I have it hooked, I have a little fan on it to make sure it doesn't overheat. It sits there in the corner of my office, and it's doing stuff, right? I probably spend, if I did out the math, I think I spend like $3 or $4 max on electricity with all the Raspberry Pis I'm running monthly, which like I would totally put toward, like I see that as an investment towards science, towards research, and towards a hobby, which is how I easily justify it. And I justify it also because I get some level of compensation back. So to some degree, it's being negated significantly. So it's a minimal cost for me to actually do something cool and have a hobby. And I don't know. I think that's really cool. I think that it's really cool that it gives me that outlet for someone who's like, okay technical wise, to actually contribute to something I have no idea or don't understand, but I just want to see progress.
Yeah, and by contributing, you end up learning a little more about that thing in itself, right? Because you end up having to go to their website, and you're just like passively sort of absorb the content of what you're contributing to. It's like a hobby, like you're saying. which is how people learn, and it sort of spreads that language, that scientific language around the people who participate in it. That's one of the great pleasures I get out of it is, like contributing to SETI or contributing to Milky Way, or even like contributing to the prime grid, prime numbers one. I didn't understand how important prime numbers were until I started contributing. I'm like, oh, I want to find a prime number. And then Barton's here. He actually found a prime number once, one of the largest prime numbers. And it's this great feeling knowing that you contributed to something that is useful to at least the rest of society, which is a lot of people. Like there's people who will use this information for cryptographic purposes. I mean, if SETI found aliens, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and this may sound a little weird, but I like, let me make sure I like phrase it properly. But I feel like a lot of us probably can think back to college. A lot of us were probably in a sci-fi club or like the anime club or whatever we want, like with a group of like total dorks, nerds, and that was like right. And I remember those years fondly. And I think my favorite part of being part of that group, right, in college or high school or whenever you were part of that group, was everyone was a total dork and a total nerd and like a geek or whatever you want to call them, but everyone had their own little thing that they were a total nerd about, right? Like one of my friends would be a total nerd about a certain type of game, another one would be a total nerd about science, but you all kind of grouped together because you were still like, you were just nerds, right? And I kind of equate that a lot to like Gridcoin, because you have these people who are super passionate about things like finding prime numbers, commingling and working together with someone who's super passionate about doing protein analysis or like or figuring out genomes or doing like weather data crunching, or like, and it's just really cool that you have this environment when all of these different types of nerds and all these different types of very passionate people can actually have a platform that, regardless if one of them promotes and assists with, every single person, regardless of the field, actually benefits. And I really like that. It's very cool how that works out. Also, yeah. I'm using nerd in a good way, just to make sure.
You call him nerd, buddy. It's I think you're right, and it's getting to the point, like, in the beginning of crypto, it was just the crypto nerds that were in the space, and then it became worth money, and then the financial geeks came in, and now it's becoming larger. It's like it's starting to encompass more and more different types of people, and they're all, for the most part, working together. And Gridcoin's like a microcosm of that, where it's exactly what you say. And then we're also starting to get people who weren't part of these groups in college, or who don't have that passion, but they still like the idea of contributing to science, and they come into the community, and everyone still learns from each other. Because most people do want to contribute to science. Most people do respect it and see what it does and what it has done for society, for humanity, and putting people on a more equal playing field through history. And people want to be part of that. And not everyone is able to be part of that on a professional level. So you've got these passionate people now starting to mix with people who just saw this thing and like, I want to participate, and they become a passionate person, or at least a participant in the system that benefits science and everyone overall. It's really fun, I think. I know we've got Barton. Do you want to say what
Barton. I won't even interrupt you with the train, possibly.
Yeah, no. I started out with Boink long before I started with Gridcoin, and I crunched Boink for probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years before I even knew what Gridcoin was. I first found it on an ad on Boink Stats one day when, just looking up my credits like everybody else, seeing how I was doing on my team, and saw an ad and said, oh, this looks cool. I can earn back some of the money I make spending on electricity and kind of recoup my money and still keep doing the Boink projects I like. And I do a lot of what you guys had previously mentioned, focusing on projects and learning things that, I wouldn't have otherwise. To be able to say that I have, found now 3 individual prime numbers with Prime Grid, one of which is in the top 5,000 primes in the world. It's something I'm really proud of, and it's something that honestly I never would have been able to say without Boink or Gridcoin helping me along the way with electricity bills. Without Gridcoin, I might not be able to run my rigs in the summer because of, electricity costs. But with Gridcoin, I can offset those costs and keep my GPUs running. And of course, the GPUs are what's really important for a lot of those projects, especially the important ones with physics and medical research and space research. Sorry.
Yeah, and you've been here for a while.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years since my first beacon was sent with Gridcoin. So yeah, I guess that's a while. To me, it doesn't seem that long, but compared to a lot of you guys, I guess it is.
One thing I will say is that the Gridcoin community, and you probably should have gotten this from all the stuff I was saying before, is extremely well-mannered and just a very nice group of people. It's probably the nicest crypto community I've ever bumped into. And I mean, I started, my crypto journey started in December of 2013, like 2 weeks before the major crash, right? Where I was just kind of watching it and saying, well, this is cool. And I've been through various communities of, what do you guys do? Why do you like it? And Gridcoin is by far one of the best communities. The amount of times on Reddit that I've seen a new member say, hey, I'm stuck, I don't know what to do, what does this term mean? Normal communities say, come on, noob, read the sidebar and like figure out the guides. The amount of times that I've seen someone in a Gridcoin Reddit thread say, oh cool, you're new, send me your address and I'll send you some startup coins, right? And I see users literally getting sent like 300, 400 Gridcoin just because they said, you're new, welcome, we really just like, we're glad to have you, another great person to have, right? Which is like, I feel like unheard of in any other crypto group where people just pass around cryptos because you're new and they want to just say welcome, right? That is really weird for the crypto world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Goblin's saying. I always loved how welcoming and inviting and just, generous the entire community around Gridcoin is. Even, when we have issues and things aren't going great, people are always willing to step up and explain things to new people and always willing to give. I mean, we talk about all the faucets, and even now people are developing new tools. We have just in the last week or so now the tip bot for Discord, and we're also have someone developing a tip bot for Reddit now. So all these things just come together and show how generous this community really is.
Yeah, it's a cool thing in we're a great community without a doubt, and what you guys are describing sounds like what we talked about during the 1H series with the community corporation episode, where it's this idea that we're a huge group of people essentially building a product together, but without a leader. We're a decentralized entity. And when the community is just so inviting and so helpful, it invites more people in. And I've been active in the community for almost a year now. And the number of people I've seen come in and just be like, hey, I'm a coder, I can help you with this. And now they're just like, talk to them every day and try and fix problems, or just like, or just talk about Gridcoin stuff or other stuff. It's heartwarming. It's a great thing to see, and to know that we're all working together for the same thing is equally as fun to watch.
Sorry, I actually wanted to add something. I forgot what was going on. My headphones are pretty good at blocking it out, so sometimes I don't hear it until after you guys mention them.
We're going to keep that train in. For you guys who are new to listening to these series, Goblin has a train that drives by every once in a while, and it's a great experience.
Yeah, every like at this time of night, it's usually every like 35 minutes or whatever. Not even. want to say. I'm sorry.
We were just blowing up our own balloon about how awesome the community is, and then I mentioned the corporate community corporation tag.
Oh yeah, no, I'm sorry. I wanted to actually just add that like for a great example, we were on. I mean, it's a problem, but it's also kind of like a feature, right, of Gridcoin, which is we're on a lot of platforms: Reddit, Discord, Slack, Steam. I mean, we're spread across a lot. But I still remember one of the Slack posts just one day. We had a new user, Jeffrey, right? I think that's actually his handle as well as I don't know. But I just remember he came on and was like, "Hey, this is my background. Where can I help?" And Barton picked him up and was like, "Yeah, here, you can help me with this." And I think day 2, he was literally helping us with like website design, right? Like there was almost no like turnaround or wait.
Yep. Yeah, he is a very, very good web developer, and he has been helping us out a lot. I think he's put in 6 PRs already just in 2 weeks. So yeah, he's very useful.
Yeah, and like started day 2. Like, oh yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
right,
we have
right
like
off the bat.
we have like 6 websites. I don't know which website you're talking about is the problem.
Yeah, there's many websites by nature of being decentralized, of course.
But yeah, I think Neurominer is still on the conference call or whatever. But for all the guys that popped in, we're talking about kind of what Gridcoin means to us, what kind of attracted us to it, why we like continuing to do it, and yeah. So if you guys want to mention in the chat or talk at all, feel free.
Yeah, I'm curious about Gray. You said this is like your first day here. What brought you? How'd you find the community, or like how'd that come about?
Is our advertising money working?
On DTube, you can.
Yeah, and actually that's a good question for like J Ringo and Chocolate. How did? Oh yeah, bananas. That's a good question for you guys. How did you find Gridcoin, right? And I mean, obviously we know that we're still with it because we're still here, right? And we're talking about it. But I found Gridcoin because I found Boink on my machine for work. And thought, wow, this is actually really cool. It's processing World Community Grid. What is this? Maybe I could put this on my personal computer, or is there, what else could I process? And Googling, those things led me to actually find Gridcoin, and my history with cryptos. I pretty much just immediately jumped on and tried to get it to work really quick. But that's kind of how I found it was through the Boink, right? But did you guys find it similar ways, or how did you guys end up finding it and getting into it?
I was a crypto nerd in the summer of 2013. So I was walking around. I remember someone brought up Doge in the chat earlier about how the Gridcoin community and the Doge community are very similar in the just how they're so friendly and just kind of a fun community. So I was part of the early Doge and just around the space back then. And I remember I had a group of friends, we'd get together and we'd talk about blockchain and how it's going to change the world and all the benefits of it. And even back then, people were talking about how it's a lot of energy and it's going to get to the point where it is right now, where it's kind of, you're using more energy than many nations just for reciprocal hashing to move the blockchain along. And the question was, well, is there something we could do that's positive for the world with this energy? And I remember finding Gridcoin, just like surfing around through the communities. Someone probably said it in a chat somewhere. And I still remember my reaction, which was just, huh, that's cool. So I mined a little bit, but when it was still proof of work. And I just didn't get active in the community until this past year. But it's always been in the back of my head as this is a actual use case for this. I remember it was Gridcoin and Curecoin were the first ones that I saw that were like, these blockchains do good stuff with the computing power they're using. And yeah, just paid attention to it moving forward and eventually decided that I have something to contribute to the community, so I got involved.
Yeah, I was watching cryptos from the you know far away for a long time, and yeah, I started getting involved or interested over the summer, and being an environmentally friendly person, and also being a researcher. I was just naturally attracted to Gridcoin. It's just in general, I try to work on things that I think are going to be around, that I think are going to last. And I do think Gridcoin has the potential to actually stick around and last and make a real impact. Whereas, I mean, I think a lot of the cryptos, many of them won't be around in 5 years, but I think Gridcoin still will be. And when I work on something, I want it to yield results.
Yeah, and actually, sorry. And actually, to kind of point out what Robotic Mind said in the chat, right, is, and that kind of goes actually with your point of like it's going around, it's going to last, and that kind of goes with its economic like friendliness, right? When you think of Bitcoin, a lot of times, a lot of people, among other things, will also think of like ant miners, right? Like the very specific mining tools and technology and hardware that is made specifically just to do that hashing.
ASIC miners, yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. And so you think of these specific hardware, and it's like, how often does that hardware, after you buy it, you chug and you chug and you chug, and then the difficulty of the block of Bitcoin is so high that that specific mining technology or that tool is pretty much now starting to get to the end of its life, and you kind of need to upgrade to actually do anything worthwhile, right? Like, I think on the generous side, you could probably say about 18 months, like generous. I think a lot of people say it's around a year before you should probably consider getting different hardware to actually keep up with the difficulty rate. But the point being, it's like with Gridcoin, since we're doing projects, and these projects don't really increase in difficulty, or and they don't really require changes in hardware. I mean, I'm running the same project on a Raspberry Pi, slower, mind you, but I'm running it on a Raspberry Pi. When I go to other locations and I use my laptop, I'm running the exact same project, usually SETI or Universe or Yo-Yo at home. I'm running any one of those on like an i7, right? And when I'm on my personal computer at home, my work computer, I can run similar projects, but maybe different ones on the GPU. And as long as you're using a CPU or a GPU, it's like, it doesn't matter what hardware. You don't have to scale up. You don't have to change anything to keep up with it, right? You might do it slower, but you don't have to overhaul and lose things. I feel like I bumped into a couple of people who just buy old junk laptops just to do some basic crunching on the side, right? Like, you can buy the super old hardware because it all contributes, which I also think is really cool.
Yeah, it's the concept of IPP, idle processing potential, where it's like, there was actually recently an article, we talked about it during one of the 1H episodes, that discussed the problem SETI was having, where they wanted to buy GPUs to crunch their data, but they couldn't buy GPUs because all the crypto miners were buying them. So we're just, as a society, as a marketplace, we're out of GPUs. They're so scarce. So the concept of IPP is like, yeah, you can buy new GPUs and maybe you'll make a little more Gridcoin with the new GPU, but you can also just use this old hardware instead of just throwing it out or reselling it. You can use it till the end of its life to contribute. And because Boink has projects that are specifically built for to work better on one piece of hardware or another, or to work better on a CPU versus a GPU, it means that you're not, and that paired with the way we distribute magnitude, which is a rather in-depth conversation that I don't think we should get into today, but the Boink projects with the magnitude economics makes it so a low-end CPU isn't necessarily competing with a high-end GPU to get a bunch of Gridcoin, which is where IPP comes in. You can use your old phone. I've got several laying around, then you just throw the processing power to a project and you get a little Gridcoin return.
Yeah, and I've seen, I think it was on Gridcoin subreddit that I saw someone post a picture of their phone, because you can literally have your phone mining Bitcoin. Excuse me, you can have it do that too. You can have your phone mining Gridcoin for you, doing projects like asteroids while you're sleeping. Like you plug it in, and it can once it hits a certain battery percentage, once it's plugged in, you can have it just crunching. It'll do it super slow. It'll take something like 18 hours, 2 days or so worth of processing time, but you can still contribute using just your phone on your nightstand. And I remember seeing someone who was like, he didn't have all the money to go buy a junk computer and to do that, but he was like, oh, I have all these old cell phones every time I update, and he'd plug it in and leave it off to the side, and just have it crunch. And he posted a picture of like, it's been like 5 years, it's contributed a lot of boink potential, or a lot of boinking has gone on this phone. It's contributed a lot, but it's time to say goodbye. The phone was literally curling, like it was literally it was like bent in a very wide parabola kind of shape, where to the point where the guy's like, it's probably safe to say the battery's about to explode. I should probably just throw it out, right? And it's like you can literally use technology that would otherwise just be scrapped to the point where it is dead. It is officially dead, right? So
Yeah, this, if you do use a phone, that is an issue. They do tend to heat up, so be careful with it. But to that, using that example and like how it's a small phone, it doesn't have a lot of processing power, but when you combine all the phones in the world, it turns out to be quite a bit of processing power. So an example of this, if we assume that every smartphone in the world is an iPhone 6, and if we use the most recent data that says there are 2.5 billion smartphones in circulation at this point, and we know that an iPhone 6 can run about 7 gigaflops, and if we network all those phones together, you have 17.5 exaflops worth of processing power. And using flops as a measure is a little tricky because some projects use different parts of the computer differently. So but that's the basic gist of it, 17.5 exaflops. And then if everyone just ran their phone when they're sleeping, it would mean they're contributing about half that power. So it's 8.75 exaflops just from networking all the smartphones in circulation. It's not even talking about all the gaming systems, all the computers, all the laptops, all the servers. There's a lot of processing power out there that already exists that if it was tapped, it would be a very, very powerful supercomputer. And we have so we do have a chat box here in the Discord. So if you don't want to talk or if you don't have a mic, you're welcome to join the conversation. You can type out responses and we'll read them on air if you want. Diogo Gomez writes, for me, Gridcoin was what got me to know Boink. I never thought about the financial aspect because I only run Boink when I'm away from the computer and the phone is charging. And he says that he thinks Gridcoin is about the incentive for getting people into Boink and other networks that incentivize us to donate processing power to science, medicine, and all that stuff while we have the devices connected without being used. So he's describing the incentive structure and how we have a little saying that's if you incentivize someone to do something, they will likely do it. So he's describing Gridcoin as the incentive structure that will bring more people into volunteered distributed computing networks, which is, I think, a huge part of Gridcoin and why I stick around as well. It's not a pay-to-play system. It's its own blockchain that mints a currency and then distributes that currency based on proportional contributions of its participants. So someone asked earlier in the chat if Gridcoin is an ERC20 token. It is not. It is not a contract. It is its own blockchain, complete with its own data. Transaction data for now is, it has two types of data in the blockchain. There's the transaction data, just like Bitcoin's ledger. And then there's these things called superblocks, which are through a process that is in depth and we will maybe get into in another episode, but they aggregate the participants' contributions to these Boink projects, and then the Gridcoin protocol distributes Gridcoin based on the data in the superblock. So by being our own blockchain, we have the freedom in the future to expand the type of data that exists in the blockchain. And we are also able to continue minting currency over time. We don't have to cap it, which currencies don't get capped. ERC20 tokens, for the most part, are capped supplies of a token, and then they're a commodity. And then the value of it is based on the demand for that contract. So anyone can contribute their processing power, and they are rewarded Gridcoin for it without having to. And then anyone can set up a BOINC project, and in the future we might have other ways to set up projects to be crunched by the Gridcoin network. But anyone can set up a BOINC project and have their data crunched essentially for free. There's some cost involved with setting up the project, but it's not. You don't need to buy Gridcoin and then trade that Gridcoin in to have your data crunched, which I think is a pretty neat aspect of it. We're built like an actual currency.
Yeah, and actually to Graylin's point regarding like there's a lot of futuristic scientific research we can do. There totally is, right? If someone can, and in its current state, right, we just require a BOINC project. So if someone can pretty much format things like an AI like work blocks, right? Like here's a block of work for an AI training module. If you like break that down and run this model and then send it back for as training data for an AI, yeah, like that's a futuristic thing that Gridcoin can work on, and it really doesn't stop there. As long as you can effectively take a project and break it down into units of work, it can effectively be done. I'm sure there's some restrictions, but that's my level of understanding as to what the restriction would need to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Graylin also says, sort of as a joke in the chat, so Cambridge Analytica can crunch data about how to brainwash. And yes, essentially. And I know this is something that Chocolate is pretty passionate about. When you have a decentralized supercomputer, it decentralizes the data. And Gridcoin is a community that supports the open source movement, open access, open data, and open education. These are principles that we try to live by. And when you decentralize who owns the data or the results of this analysis, it helps decentralize power just a little bit. Because knowledge is power and data is power. So it keeps it from getting too centralized in the hands of a couple companies like Cambridge Analytica, who just they own everyone's data, and they're able to do very interesting things with it.
Yeah, and actually to your point though, it's like if someone said, here's a project, right, and I want Gridcoin to crunch this project. This project is consumer sentiment we're using for political, reasons, something similar to some scandal, whatever, like something that someone doesn't want to happen, right? They need the data process, they don't want to pay for anything, and they try to put it in our face. Realistically, one, we'd have to agree as a community to actually accept it as something that we would offer credit on, so voting on the whitelist, which is once you get a wallet up and running, you literally just say yes or no, I'm going to vote, and say I don't want this here, I do want this here. And with things like that, we've had some. Not everything that goes on the offering to be on the whitelist actually passes. A lot of things will fail. And once it gets on the whitelist, right, you still don't actually have to process it, right? We're just saying we'll give you credit for doing it. And if it's evil-ish enough, or people agree that they don't really like it, but it was somehow voted in, it will likely not get the love it needs to actually process in a decent amount of time, right? Like no one will really focus on it. No one will switch their projects from what they're doing currently to actually go do it. And then the only other point I wanted to make was, excuse me, something really cool. I wish we had this statistic, and I feel like someone does somewhere if we dug it up. But I'd really love to know the amount of time and processing that Gridcoin has contributed to science thus far? I feel like everyone says yes in the chat. I don't know if that means yes, you think that's a really cool thing to have, or yes, we have it. I feel like it's yes, we have it.
I think they're saying yes, it's safe to install without a VM.
Oh, they're answering a completely different question. Okay, awesome. Yeah, okay, darn.
We can get some of those stats.
Because that'd be a really cool stat, like right, like in like as much electricity as Gridcoin users use, it's like yeah, Gridcoin users have used like 1/100th of the amount of power that some other crypto has used. However, like this is how much processing they've done towards science and development and such.
I can say that we contribute a little more than 6 petaflops of processing to BOINC. That's about 28% of BOINC's total processing power. And BOINC itself, I think it's the third largest supercomputer in the world if you just go by potential flops. And that would make Gridcoin somewhere between 20 and 25 on the list of world's largest supercomputers. So we're already up there. To determine how much we've contributed throughout history, I think it's possible. You would just need to do a lot of math with BOINC credits and magnitude and stuff like that. It would be a task.
It would be heavily dependent on the projects as well, because not all projects publish those statistics, like how much is crunched on a daily or weekly or monthly basis. Some are a lot better than others, but some just don't publish that data at all.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we couldn't, at the very least, try and estimate that as like at least even if it was just a very safe number. I think even a safe number would still be very impressive to show, in terms of we've actually been doing like X. Like for the small community that we actually think we are, I still think we produce a lot, and I think we contribute a significant amount.
I think you're right. And moving forward, looking back in history might be difficult, but I think you're right. It would be worth doing. But moving forward, we started collecting this data with the State of the Network reports, which are reports put out by me and community member Parajan every 2 weeks, right before the Gridcoin Hangouts, which is Saturday. So we are going to be able, in a month or two, to be able to say how much we contributed over the past couple months. So we're starting to collect this data, and this is the beautiful thing about being an open source community is people like myself and others saw that this is something I can contribute. I can help collect this data and put it in a presentable format so we can have it moving forward. So maybe in a year when we want to have the numbers that you're talking about, we can have the numbers. So we have people coming into the community, and more people are always welcome, and they just contribute what you think you can contribute, and help make Gridcoin an even better project. And because it's the blockchain, you will likely be paid in Gridcoin, and the incentive structure of blockchain at its core is that you benefit yourself by helping your blockchain grow. You're able to be greedy in a selfish way, and it's not a bad thing. It's like you're helping everyone. Full disclosure, that's a quote from someone famous that someone brought up in a chat before, but I don't remember who. I saw another question. Someone asked if we are proof of work or proof of stake, and that is something that we should have talked about right in the beginning. Quick history, Gridcoin started as a proof of work cryptocurrency in 2013. I think it was split 50-50, where 50% of the hash power was directed towards the blockchain and 50% was directed towards BOINC projects. And then to become a more eco-friendly coin and to contribute more hash power to science itself, to BOINC, it switched to a proof of stake protocol in 2014. I want to say October something 2014. So we are still running a proof of stake protocol, which means you secure the blockchain by holding a balance on the network, and you are rewarded for participating in that process. We did experiment with something called proof of research, which is the idea that the blockchain itself, which is the base technology, is secured by contributing to BOINC. We are not able to continue that process at the time, but it might be something that gets developed in the future when we grow even more and really start to develop some very unique protocols, even more unique than what exists right now. So we operate as a proof of stake current protocol blockchain, and we have this GRC research mint, which is a set amount of Gridcoin, which is minted every day and distributed to participants of BOINC based on their relative contributions to projects through a tool called Magnitude.
And yeah, the other thing to add actually is since we're open source and since people develop on the platform and add to the platform all the time, we had one user, I don't remember who created a function called, who created a Python script to do something called rain. And effectively what it does is you have the ability to let it rain GRC over the people who are currently processing the project. So if you see a bunch of people, or if you only have a small group of people processing your project, you can incentivize them and say thank you by effectively saying, here's a tip. Like, I bought some GRC and I'm actually just going to give it out across a bunch of people, here you go, right? And I really like that a lot, because I think part of the future of GRC is going to be processing potentially non-BOINC, non-like BOINC approved projects, like very, very small time scientist stuff. And there are ways of gifting the users with GRC would be to just buy and let it rain on them, right? So I really like the fact that we literally have 3 ways of incentives and ways of making it work, right? Just staking, and that's one of the ways I do it, is I just leave wallets running as a node, actually doing the work, and then you can even just say you can get tips, which I don't know. There's a lot of ways to get paid in GRC.
Yeah, it can be used from the rain feature it opens Gridcoin's audience up. It says a small time scientist can use the Gridcoin network, and people will volunteer to the project based on magnitude economics, which we will discuss in a later episode. Or a large company, for example, could come in and say, look, we just have this data set that we want to get crunched very quickly. So we're going to buy a bunch of GRC and we're going to rain it on the participants of this project. So it brings a lot of computing power to that project, and that work gets done quickly. And then the people who crunch that project then disperse back to their standard project. I think it's pretty cool feature as well. So does anyone have any other sort of base questions about what Gridcoin is as a protocol or a community, or Goblin or Chalk, that you've anything that you think we should add in this sort of base level description of what we are and why we're all here?
I guess I'd just raise the question of where do people see Gridcoin going? You know, what do people see Gridcoin as in 5 years from now? What's it going to look like?
What do you think?
Well, I guess a better question would be to say, you know, what can it become? Because what will it become? I mean, that's impossible to tell. What can it become? I mean, I think it'd be really cool if Gridcoin became, you know, the world's largest supercomputer, and if we had some way to, you know, offset the electricity that we do use with green energy by, you know, having some sort of marketplace between Gridcoin and some green energy coin. I think that'd be really cool. You know, I think a lot of people will come up, you know, over time, people will come with projects to BOINC and to Gridcoin, the more popular it becomes. Once they realize that they have this tool on their hands, I think we're going to start seeing some really creative, really inventive projects coming up specifically because of Gridcoin, and I think that's where a lot of Gridcoin's potential can come from.
Yeah, I agree. And it's because we're an open source community, and it's open source not in just a code sense. We're an open source community where anyone can come in and take what people have built before and respectfully make it fit what they specifically need at that moment in time. So I agree. I think we're going to get a lot of people coming in and doing some pretty interesting stuff with Boink projects, especially once we as a community grow to the point where we can help Boink make projects, like help their documentation, help contribute to the actual code of Boink maybe. Someone brought up in the chat earlier that we already donate to Boink projects to help cover their server costs. There are a bunch of them that accept donations in Gridcoin. SETI is one of them. I think Yo-Yo, PrimeGrid might. And then Boink Stats, which is the website that lets us compare all our crunching data, also accepts Gridcoin donations. So support those guys too. They are, the projects themselves and the Boink Stats is a great resource.
I will say, there was an article recently that posted about how cryptos was killing SETI, and I actually got really mad at that because the argument was effectively they're taking all the processing power away from things that really need it, such as things like SETI. And I actually emailed the paper and just said, Gridcoin actually helped. Gridcoin is a cryptocurrency that helps SETI, right? And just like, if you guys want to know more, there's a bunch of people here that would be more than willing to talk to you about it, right? Of course, I didn't get a response back, but it's like, I don't know. That's something that just was reminded of.
I remember that.
Yeah, we
emailed them too. Yeah.
Everyone in Fireside was so annoyed when they found that. What are you talking about killing SETI? We're trying to save it. It's on life support. But the point being, where I see Gridcoin in the future is actually, I feel like I actually see it helping, at least in the short term, right, is helping smaller scientists as much as the larger ones, right? Where effectively we build out a mechanism that allows small-time scientists with a lot of data that would normally take probably a month worth of processing, a smaller amount, to chunk up the work into a Boink project, not have to worry about being big enough to be accepted onto the Boink platform, but still have work units that they can send out to Gridcoin, right? And to me, that's cool because I feel like a lot of small scientists have a lot of really cool things that they're working on, that they have this barrier of entry, which is simply not enough resources, not enough processing time, not enough time to actually get that stuff done. So they have to do it in weird ways and maybe not necessarily cut corners, but try to do it in ways where like, okay, we'll chunk out this stuff. I don't need this stuff, even though it might be important or it might come out to a good result, because I have a limited amount of time. And I feel like Gridcoin, in an extremely economical and monetarily efficient way, can actually like help scientists of any size. And that's kind of where I see it in the short term, probably the next like 2 years or so.
Yeah, me too. I think, the world is increasingly being built by data or run by data, and science is no exception to that. And we just need more ways to crunch it that don't cost so much money and take so much time. And I think Gridcoin can serve as, if not the most powerful supercomputer in the world, one of the most powerful. And it can serve these PhD students, undergrads, garage tinkers with large sets of data, just because you collect a lot of data now in science. So less experiment and more simulation and data set. So yeah, I think Gridcoin will be a great outlet for them, along with larger entities. I think we'll also start to see them come in. Universities, maybe there are a bunch of university professors that have this data that they just have been sitting on for up to a decade at some point or sometimes. and they just can't get it crunched because the university doesn't have the resources to get it there, or all the computers are being used or something like that. So we can present an outlet for larger researchers as well. And I think that's something that is in the maybe not 2 years, maybe not 5 years, but close in relative terms.
Well, I think it's a good way for Gridcoin to stay relevant, right? I think being the largest supercomputer would be a really cool title to get, and a really cool way to get a lot of exposure. And I mean, once you get on that top 5 list, I feel like the exposure would pretty much put you at least in the top 3 or 2. And again, that exposure would just hold you there, right? There,
Yeah.
once you start to make those lists, it's really the exposure and the publicity that kind of keeps you there, because more people hop on and help you out. But I feel like starting to get there would definitely get more small time people, because the people I think, because it's a great way to get more people on board, is the people you help are inclined to kind of contribute back by saying, oh, I didn't know this was a thing, this is really cool, I could actually process my own project with my laptop and help what little I needed to, right? Like you could put on your own project and actually like help process your own stuff, and you contribute like 4 or 5 hours of processing if you thought you needed to, right? Which it's like helping your own stuff or helping someone else's because they helped you is the kind of environment I feel like Gridcoin is building up, and I feel like it fits very well with the mantra or the general environment that Gridcoin community is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I also think a big part of the at least 5 years away is actually directly funding science through some sort of grant system, because we are a currency that gets minted, and we can build structures, we can build treasury systems that. So right now we have IPP. That is the main way that people vote on which project they like. They direct their processing power to specific projects, and that means that they like that project for one reason or another. What if there was a way to, automatically split some of your earned Gridcoin and give it to a research project that has put a proposal forward and just needs funding to get the project running, and then you get paid back for crunching that project, or some system like that, where we really, instead of just crunching data, which is huge in itself, we're also deeper in the full scientific process of helping people get research started and going and keeping it running. Because funding in the world today, maybe it'll get better in the future, but in the world today, science funding is not at the top of the priority list for a lot of people. But we are at about an hour. So does anyone have any final words or final question or anything? And we'll wrap it up here. I want to thank everyone for joining us at the Fireside here. I want to thank Chocolate and Goblin for helping host. We're here every Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I think midnight UTC now. And we will just be talking about Gridcoin. If you have any questions, feel free to bring them. We've got people who have been here for years. We've got new people who will probably share the same question that you have, and we'll help as best we can. Again, if you want to participate in discussions that are focused primarily on development of Gridcoin, I would invite you to the Gridcoin Hangouts every other Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern. The next one is this Saturday, which is in 2 days. And I think that about covers it. So we will see you next Thursday, right here in the Gridcoin Discord server.